Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello there, welcome to episode 102, I think, of 1% Better, and delighted that you're checking this one out. This is season 3, and we're kind of moving into another new topic this week where we deep dive into finance, personal finance, how you can make better financial decisions and more informed decisions with my guest, PaddyDelaney. I will go into a little bit of detail about that before the episode kicks off. So we're 3 or 4 episodes in. This was the 4th episode of season 3, third guest. We've touched on management in the first one, leadership, and how to deal with time in prison, maybe with Man and Sheila in second, and last week was Susan Winter focusing on relationships. And a few folks have got in touch after listening to the relationship one with Susan. A few things jumped out for them. The term breadcrumbing, which I had in the title, was something that folks probably hadn't heard of that much of before. Ghosting, you may have heard of that from the online dating world. And catfishing, definitely a term that has grown up to prominence a lot over the last few years. Susan's a really interesting lady, and she was on Oprah, as I mentioned. Great guest. Not only can you listen to the podcast, you can watch the video. It's on the YouTube channel as well. So if you have enjoyed it, let somebody maybe know about it that might get something out of it. Drop them an email or a text and let them know where they can find it. I would really appreciate that. As always, I'm trying to make the podcast better, and I was reading an article this week around how not to grow your podcast audience, and it called out a few bullet points here. So I was trying to see, do I do some of these things that prevent me from growing the audience? And one of them was asking for subscriptions before you deliver value. So I know that I always ask folks to leave a comment or a rating or a review, and definitely subscribe, because again that helps with the ranking in the podcasting charts. I do ask for it. I was asking myself the questions here: am I guilty of some of these points that were released by a podcast Hall of Famer, believe it or not? So I hope when I do ask for subscriptions and sign-ups, which obviously are free to the 1% Better show, hopefully there is value from doing that. If you do enjoy it, then subscribe. Maybe that's the best way to do it. If you don't enjoy it, don't subscribe. But if you don't enjoy it, I would love you to let me know what you're not enjoying, and if there's a large consensus around that, then I could try and make it more enjoyable. I suppose that's how I can help myself improve. That's just one. Sending people to the haystack that is Apple Podcasts is another. I definitely send folks there. It's one of the top platforms for people listening to podcasts. 60 or 70% of people do listen through Apple. Spotify is getting bigger and bigger, but there's a number of different apps that you can listen through, and I've just put onto the front page of the website and the latest page of the website, where it says latest, links to 6 of the podcast apps of choice. So there's Apple, there's Spotify, Spreaker, Overcast, I think Google. So there's lots there. So go to whichever one you want. I'm giving you the choice. The more choice, I suppose, sometimes the better, sometimes the worse. But that's a second one. A third one was asking for reviews to help us be found. So the reviews piece, I'm not really looking for reviews to be to be found. It's more to learn from what is going down well and what maybe could be done better, as I keep saying. So that's interesting. Obsessing over chart positions, that's not going to help you grow your podcast. I definitely agree with that. I've learned over the last few years that that doesn't really matter a whole lot. Some weeks I have in the hundreds of listens and the chart position could go up, and other weeks I would have more and it would go down, and then it's just random, but it does kind of fall on the subscriptions. And I think from the statistics that I saw lately, 20% of the people that listen to the podcast have subscribed. Only that amount. Interesting I suppose from my perspective, maybe not from yours. You're probably saying, let's move along here, Rob, and get on with the show. But anyway, that's just stuff that I was reading through this week, how to try and grow the podcast. These are some of the guilty sins or sins that you shouldn't be committing. And for the most part, I think I'm doing okay there. Anyway, okay, this week's episode is with Paddy Delaney. Me and Paddy, or Paddy and I, connected a couple of years ago, I think. He's his own podcast, his own blog. He's an award-winning blogger. And it's all focusing in on financial management from a personal perspective. And as always, when I reach out to somebody to talk with them, potentially for an episode, I have to have a personal interest in this, and this is definitely one that I was interested in. You read a lot about how to manage your finances better, or listen to podcasts about it. But sometimes I guess my paranoia is when you're talking to a financial advisor, they're already trying to sell you a product or a service that will obviously get them commission, that they have some lean towards. So it's trying to get somebody that's completely independent, and that is something we talk about with Paddy on the show. As I said, he's an award-winning blogger, which he's won an award 2 years in a row. He's a very sound guy, as you'll hear, and he talks about his own journey into the financial world, how he gave up a solid job after a number of years to take a leap of faith into doing what he loves, which is financial management on his own terms, I guess, and then through the podcast, through his blogging, how he's getting more and more recognition for the good work that he does. He's very clear in his own purpose, his mission, trying to help people, and I can certainly connect and resonate with that. As I listened back to it and I edited the show, we did hit on a lot of questions on financial management that are probably common enough, but you may not get the chance to ask somebody without paying for it, maybe. So this is a free way of getting some financial advice. I personally was interested in long-term investments, that kind of compound interest, paying off your mortgage soon rather than holding off for large payments for later. Those sort of things, and a few other nuggets that Paddy shared that I wasn't aware of at all. So that's pretty much me rambled done for the week. I will leave that there, headed over to Paddy Delaney and the conversation I had with him a few weeks ago. Check out the show notes, links to Paddy's website, informeddecisions.ie, him on Twitter. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy this one. And as always, if it's of value, let me know, subscribe, and that person you are chatting to over lunch, maybe say to them, do you listen to podcasts? Do you hear the 1% Better podcast? 100 or so episodes. You might be interested in checking it out. You could learn something from it. Broad range of topics and all that good stuff. So there you go. Next week, I think I am going to release an episode with a CEO and a guy that I would say is closest to a polymath that I've talked to, and reminds me of a younger Elon Musk from the perspective of all the stuff going on in this guy's brain. Not that I know a younger Elon Musk, but that's what I imagine he'd sound like. All right, enjoy the episode, guys. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening as always. Good luck. Bye-bye. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the 1% Better podcast, and we're well into season 3 at this stage. And thinking back of all the episodes I've done so far, I haven't really had any focused in on personal finance or finance in general. So figured I had to address that, and I'm delighted to introduce my guest this morning, who's going to help us really focus in on all of that good stuff. Paddy Delaney of Informed Decisions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. I'm delighted to be here, and hopefully I can help explain and share some insights around the whole personal finance piece. If I could do that, I'd be a happy man.
Yeah, it's my selfish way of getting a free session of personal finance advice. So if no one else gets anything from it, whatever about it.
Absolutely.
Paddy, you're an award-winning financial blogger, I think, by X2 over the last 2 years in a row or so, is it?
Yeah. I don't really know how they came about, to be perfectly honest with you, but yeah, I started blogging, even though, in fairness, before I started blogging, I actually didn't even know what that meant, to be perfectly fair. I just started writing about an area that I'm really passionate about and that I have a real interest and hobby around, and that's personal finance and investing and financial planning. And yeah, I managed to pick up a couple of awards along the way. I'm not sure what those awards were judged on. I really don't. But yeah, whoever was judging it seemed to like what I was putting out there.
That's cool though, isn't it? And do you even know how you got, kind of in the short list for that? Did you have to submit anything?
Oh yeah, so it was actually my wife, Fiona, said, Paddy, I don't know where she came across it, but she just sent it on to me and she says, you got to put yourself in for this. And I was like, the way these things can be a bit cheesy or whatever. And
yeah,
I said, look, let's put it out there, and just submitted the application. And yeah, I got shortlisted, and then I got invited to the night. Didn't know if I was going to win or not. And then obviously got the name called out, so it was the super buzz.
Did you have a speech prepared?
No, I was all ready to speak, of course, right? Me being me, and I didn't get the opportunity to say a few words, Rob, because there was lots of awards for the different categories. So they basically just gave you an award and shooed you off the stage. Okay. It's pretty much how it was.
So they were playing the kind of Oscar music even before you kind of were walking up.
Yeah.
Get out. Well, no, it's great to. I know, there's awards can have different perspectives on them, but it's nice to get recognised, and it's certainly good for the brand as well.
Absolutely, yes, no harm. And look at, I suppose when I won the first award in 2017, I was probably a year into the whole blogging, and I was working full time. It was pure hobby thing, that it sort of did when the kids went to bed or getting up particularly early in the morning to create that. And I was doing it. It was really a soul fire project, as I was calling it at the time. It was something that I was really keen on. I was really getting a lot of buzz from doing. So I wasn't doing it for anything other than genuinely trying to share some insights and I guess help people avoid some common mistakes that I see with regards to personal finance, really. Yeah. So it was great to get recognition for it, 100%.
Cool. Well done on it. So maybe talk to me a bit about your background then in the world of finance. Was it a burning desire when you were growing up to be a finance guru?
No, and I wouldn't say I am a finance guru, Rob. Right? Okay. So don't try and label me with that now. Was it a burning desire? I think very few of us are blessed to have a burning desire at a young age for anything in particular. To be honest with you, I think the number of people that know from a very young age exactly what they want to do is pretty small, and I think they're very fortunate people. My career, if I can call it a career, was very much a meandering path, I guess, to be honest, until I found what I'm doing now. But yeah, look, at my parents were in the banking space, and I would have been around banking and all that sort of stuff. And I always had an interest in money, not accumulating great wealth, but just in terms of how I managed it or spent it or saved it, and observing other people and what they were doing with money. I always had an interest in it. Did I always want to become, a financial expert? I probably wouldn't say that, but yeah, like I did a general business studies degree down in Waterford. Had a super time down there, and then I went into retail management. I always worked in shops and supermarkets over the years as a youngster, and had an interest in that space. I loved working with people, and I loved the numbers, and I thought that retail would be a decent place to try and do that. So I did that for a couple of years from 2002 until 2005. Working with some large retailers as a store manager, basically. Didn't particularly love it though. So then I knew a change was in order, and I was at that time, Rob, I'm sure you'll remember, 2004, 2005. You could pretty much walk into an interview and they'd offer you the job right before you even open your mouth, just because you turned up to the interview, right? And there was so many jobs around the place. So I sort of had a pick of options at that stage, and I went in working in a bank, and that was 2005 as a financial advisor, and did that, in a bank on behalf of a big insurance company for 7 years.
Were you qualified in that when you walked in 2005 as a financial advisor?
So the way it generally was working back then was you would sort of come in as a trainee. You would do certain aspects of financial planning for customers while you became qualified. So what you were studying at night time and stuff like that. So I became qualified within a year or two of starting that career, and then sort of really, really enjoyed aspects of that role, right? And really got a buzz out of, developing the client relationship piece and genuinely helping people. But I'll be honest, Rob, I found the structures in which I was working limited the impact that I felt I could have with a person or with a client, right? So in 2012, I actually got an opportunity to move into the whole space of learning and development within financial services. And again, as I said, I love working with people. I love learning. I love educating myself. I love reading. I love how our minds work. And so that for me was a super move to get that opportunity to go into learning and development, where I was training, coaching, facilitating other people in the financial services industry. So I did that from 2012 until 2018. And absolutely, I feel that was a pivotal, I guess, experience, or a number of years for me, in terms of me developing my understanding of the whole area of financial planning, and also my understanding of what customers really want and how we can really help people. And so in May of 2018, a really difficult decision, I left the company that I had been with for 13 years, because it was a great company to work with, great people, great staff, great culture, and basically set out to pursue the blog and to develop the blog and the website that I had started in 2016. So since May of 2018, just after the birth of our third child, I said, what better time to leave a perfectly secure and reasonably well-paid job to go out on my own. So Fiona has obviously been pivotal in all of this, Rob. Yeah.
It sounds like the question I'll ask then is, if you were coaching with some client and they were kind of wondering, oh, I'd like to go out on my own, we just after had a third child, what sort of financial security would you have to have in place for them to make that a good idea? Or I suppose, how did you kind of observe your own decision-making process there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I know you've interviewed some really great people that would be far more qualified in the space of understanding the psyche of decision making than I. But like for me, it was something that I'd always had a graw to do something, right? If that makes sense, and I'm sure there are people out there that maybe that will resonate with, that they wanted to do something here, right? And to be honest with you, Rob, I struggled with that for a long time, and it caused me to probably make some silly decisions and behave in ways that maybe weren't in line with what I'm about. Towards the end of my career within that company, and but I'd probably say that the single biggest difference in all of that was when I was becoming a qualified coach. As part of that qualification, it was mandatory that you become coached yourself by a qualified coach. And it was through that process that I recognized, this is what I want to do. This is the end goal for me. Well, not the end goal, but this is the next step for me, and get clarity on that. And what a coach does is basically make you accountable for progressing the goal, for progressing what it is you want to achieve. Is that some money you're dropping there? Is that
just after having a eureka moment there? Go on. Thankfully, I can edit that out.
The penny has dropped.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, it was, that's what a coach does, or a decent coach should do. That is help you progress something that is important to you. A, to figure out what's important, and then B, to get towards it. So that for me was great. And part of those stepping stones was the financial piece, absolutely, and building up reserves. But also, I would say, in being really careful about your business plan, and making sure that your forecast and your expectations are realistic. And because otherwise you might have the greatest idea in the world, but then because perhaps your what you actually achieve in terms of return or revenue or whatever your measure is doesn't meet expectations, you mightn't be able to continue with that project for long enough to actually make it work, if that makes any sense, if I've explained that okay. So for me, it was about being very planful, and I'm a planful guy by nature. I don't make rash decisions. I try and weigh up all the pros and cons and make a decision based on that, as I continue to do today. So I guess it has worked, right? So we're now nearly a year out, and it is working fine, right? I'm generating what I need to generate. It was never about becoming a millionaire. It was about doing the work that I really want to do with the people that I really want to do it with.
Mm-hmm.
So far, so good, Rob.
Very good. Yeah, no, it's a methodical answer, and I agree with obviously the coaching element, kind of in the same sort of perspective of understanding what you want to do, figuring out your why, and then certainly trying to execute against it in a planful way.
Absolutely.
What was the question? So you mentioned business plan. I think a lot of the times people come up with these ideas of, I want to go out on my own, it's my passion, it's really what I want to do, and don't really kind of go into the detail of, okay, I need to generate 50 clients next year to break even or to survive. And the idea of, even I talk to a lot of people about entrepreneurial ventures, and what's the biggest thing that they maybe learned early on is cash flow and not having enough, potentially coming in. Is business planning, when you're working with your clients, is something you kind of focus in on as well, and maybe talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd like to. One thing that I think has helped me greatly, and while it wasn't deliberate at the time, Rob, it was the fact that I have that presence with informed decisions, right? So when I started that was honestly, that was not my, I'm going to build this brand up, or whatever you want to call it, to then, when I do leave employment, that will be there to sustain me or to ensure I have a profile or whatever the case may be. It genuinely wasn't. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because the Informed Decisions blog, it is not and never was a marketing tool. It was there to honestly try and add some value to people that are interested in this space, honestly. And I think that's why people receive it well. I'm not trying to sell anything on it, right? I'm genuinely trying to share information. So the point I'm making here, or trying to make, is if you are preparing or planning to take a change in career or do something different, I think the more preparation, the more work that you can do in advance of that, the easier that transition is going to be. And I know that's probably a very simple point, but this is work, right? Like, if I was to think about it, I probably have spent, I'd say, about 1,000 hours working and creating informed decisions over the last couple of years. And I've done that perfectly happily. I've loved every minute of that. So if you can find something that you are very happy to invest energy and work into, but that is also potentially going to support your endeavors, then I think that's a winning sort of formula for making it a success.
Mm-hmm. And you found many X amount of clients coming to you through that. Yeah. So what the way that I work, and I probably it's why it's part of the reason why I went the path I did. Like, for me, I genuinely want to try and make a difference in how financial services is done, right? I mean that, right? In Ireland, at least in Ireland, right? So for me, the way that I can do that is I can continue to work coaching, training financial advisors, brokers, in terms of how to engage clients and really have a meaningful impact with clients. But also, I can now work with a small number of individual clients myself from a financial planning perspective. So those are the two main activities that I do now. So I do the training and coaching in the financial advice space, but I also work with a small number of clients then that come to me
looking for help with their own financial planning. And I do that in a very deliberate way. I don't sell products. So what I do for people is I help them figure out what's important to them and help create a financial roadmap for them. And that's a very different service to, let's say, a broker might do, for instance, or whatever the case may be. So that's the way that I work.
It's interesting. The kind of business model is changing in some ways in how you do what you're doing. I guess some of the stuff I'm kind of putting out there is, again, similar, all about what I'm passionate in and sharing lots and lots of content for free. I listened to Sam Harris's podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of Waking Up. And he's kind of a neuroscientist, mindfulness expert and author and whatnot, but his view is similar in that he puts out all the stuff for free, and you decide then, like, he obviously has a platform where you get the content for free. After you consume it, you then decide, okay, I value that, I'll donate $5 to his Patreon account. So it's not only try before you buy, it's completely use before you buy, and at the end you can have maybe a moral discussion with yourself to say, well, I got something out of it that I'll donate X, or I still got something out of it but I'm not willing to give some money to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's an interesting one. I see the Guardian website, the newspaper. They have a similar model, right? They're running, majority of what they're doing now is fundraised, and I guess their proposition is independent news, right? So I'm a big fan of them because they're not, I guess, influenced by advertisers, etc. They're honest, hopefully honest, unbiased journalism. And I guess that's what I am trying to do within the financial services space, is I'm putting stuff out there that most people in the space wouldn't put out there, in terms of being totally honest, totally authentic about fees, charges, lies that you might be told. And so that I'm honestly trying to make a positive difference. And I guess an example of that is there's a guy in the UK who used to run his own marketing consultancy in the financial services space called Andy Agathangelo, and he has set up this movement called the Transparency Task Force in the UK, which is all about improving the levels of transparency and openness and trust within financial services space, so that this profession and this industry will still be around in 20 years, right? Because there's a trust barometer done by Edelman. It's called the Edelman Trust Barometer every year, and it sort of maps out the levels of trust within different industries and different sectors globally. And consistently, financial services is, bottom of the pile in terms of trust from consumers, right? And that's a big problem. It has a big problem. And so I've joined Andy and the Transparency Task Force. It's purely voluntary, right? There's nobody making any money out of that. Yeah. As Ireland's only ambassador for the Transparency Task Force, and I'm trying to spread the word and I guess get other people in the industry involved in that to, increase the levels of honesty, transparency, and openness, because that to me is what is holding it back and holding people back from engaging with credible financial planners and advisors.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you have, I'm doing a blog about authenticity at the moment, so it's topical for me, but an authentiometer, I'm calling it almost, that you see financial planners in your world are posting stuff online and social, and can you detect inauthentic ones easily? And again, it's easy to, that's a subjective thing, but you see through what they're trying to sell. Are they in it for the money, or
can I see, or can other people see?
Both, I guess.
I did a blog recently called How to Get Financial Advice in Ireland. I think it was called. It's in the last couple of weeks. It'll be on the website. A blog and a podcast on it, and it was basically outlining the different types of advisors and the different ways in which they work and how they are paid. And And again, it's not casting a judgment on any of them, but it's just making people aware of the different models, right? So for instance, I guess I firmly believe that the majority of financial advisors operating in the country are not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, right?
Right.
In terms of the advice that they would give. But I do think there's a lack of transparency around how people are paid. You know, the potential conflict of interest is a big thing. So, you know, should you clear your mortgage, or should you invest that money with me, Mr. Customer? Oh, well, look, you should invest it with me. Obviously, that might be a conflict of interest, right? Because the advisor might make money out of them buying a product. So I guess that's a constant conflict of interest that the central bank are constantly trying to manage and minimize the impact of that on the advice that is given. So for instance, there's a thing at the moment where an advisor, if a broker, right, can call themselves independent, all right? So ultimately what that currently means is that they can give you products from different providers, right, from different insurance companies or whatever the case may be. But they would still get commission if you say invest a lump sum, and they might get an annual fee again if you invest money with them. So the word independent probably doesn't match with the behavior, if that makes sense. So the central bank are looking at only allowing advisors who don't earn commission, who only charge a fee for the service. They're looking at only allowing those advisors to call themselves independent. And there are very few of those advisors.
Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a question I've often asked myself, or when I'm looking for financial advice. There's that voice in your head, like, this person is in bed with one bank or another, or you know, so it's a challenge I think everybody probably has.
It is a challenge, and I think it's unfortunate, because I go back to that point. I firmly believe that the impact that proper financial advice can have is huge, and I believe that most advisors out there are trying to do it the right way, but there's this fee structure and commission structures that are probably muddying the waters a little bit, and I guess that's ultimately my ambition, is to help clear those waters, and for more people to get advice without having to be worried about, oh, is this authentic advice, or is this just in your interests advice? And that's what I do a lot of work with advisors on, is trying to articulate how they work and what it is they do and the value they can bring to people.
So your skill set of being a financial advisor and a coach, and you know, very much from what I'm hearing from you and the work you do, authentic, genuine, honest, there's a heavy emotional intelligence element to that. So
I don't know about that, but
you know, but I think it's coming across that way. So that's probably quite a unique mix in the world you're in, is it?
I don't know. I guess, look, I this is another thing. I try not to compare myself to anybody else, right?
Sure.
I think comparison is the enemy of contentment.
But I'm sure you're probably hearing it from clients, and again, I'm not trying to promote or promote you here, you know, but I'm just saying, for me, it seems that that's a unique enough mix.
Maybe it is, and some clients have commented on that, and look, I'm hugely grateful to be in the space that I'm in and to do the work that I'm doing. I'm so grateful for that, and I really am having the time of my life, right? Honestly, without trying to get too emotional here, I really am enjoying what I'm doing, right? And I feel I'm making a difference, and that to me is my purpose, right? Is to make a difference. So yeah, I guess the model that I'm working under allows me to I believe operate in a very authentic way, and to hopefully be making a positive difference. And yeah, people have said that is coming true, and happy days. So I want to just continue that, and look at I have no ambitions to grow the financial planning side of things to a massive scale. Working with 50 clients over the long term to help them is sort of where I'm at the moment, and that's going according to plan. People are coming to me, right, which is really great. So yeah, it's Look, I guess it's a new way of doing it. There's probably not too many, if any, other people doing it in the same way. But as I said, I try not to compare myself to anybody else. It's more about doing it the way that I believe adds real value.
Okay, I'll stop giving you a big head there now. So,
please do.
Just one question around the purpose before I maybe get into more tactical ones that people might learn something from on the finance side. Obviously, doing coaching, you figure out your why a lot, you figure out your how to get there. When you're bringing that question to financial advisors in the training and you put it up on your whiteboard, what is your purpose? Are they, for the most part, looking at you like, what's this guy on? Is it groundbreaking stuff?
A little bit of that, Rob, I would say, a little bit of that. But again, they're probably forewarned before I start working with them in one way, shape or form about what we're going to be doing. And it's interesting. As I said, I admire the vast majority of financial advisors that are out there trying to do good work, right? But yet even they don't often recognize the value that they bring, right? They don't. They might, and again, this is talking in general terms. They might just see themselves as, oh, look, I do pensions, or I just do life cover, or whatever the case may be. But like ultimately, I try to encourage them to take a bit more of a bigger picture view on how they actually can help people and how they can engage people more in thinking about the bigger picture. And it's not about the products. It's not about the product. I know that's what might generate them an income, right? But ultimately, this is about people's lives, right? And it's about the well-being and their financial preparedness for the future, and their well-being if they don't reach that stage in life, or whatever the case may be, and the well-being of their families. So to me, it's much more than products. The products are just the tools by which to solve a problem that somebody has. And I believe the skill of an advisor, and it is a skill and an ability, is to get a customer thinking, what the friggin' hell is important to you here? What are your priorities? What do you want to do with yourself, right? Is there more than what you're currently doing, or is there something different that you want to do? And then allow me to facilitate that and to figure out how you can achieve that financially. And that's really what financial advice is, I believe, about. It's not about selling bloody products. Nobody wants a pension. Nobody wants life cover, but they want the value and the benefit from those tools, right? I think the penny drops, though, right? People start to, when they think about it, when they really think about it from their own perspective, perhaps they start to say, okay, right, there's something in this, and this is not just waffle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. So you're probably touching on some of the more targeted questions then that folks might get some learnings from. So rules to follow. What are the kind of rules you would advocate to a client that they should follow to be financially secure, or what, I suppose? Yeah. What comes up when I ask that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess the clients that typically would come to me would generally be, they would have, large amount of assets, or maybe complex sort of financial situations that they need help figuring out, right? And what I always find interesting is that irrespective of how much money somebody might have, there is generally speaking, a lack of awareness around what they are spending, right? About what their outgoings are, right? And generally speaking, right, there are some exceptions, but the vast majority of people have no real handle on where their money is going and what they're spending their money on. They might know how much they're earning, but they actually don't think about what they're spending. And to me, that is the first place to start. If you're looking at your finances, I don't care if you're planning for 40 years down the road or for next week. I do believe that the first place to start is figuring out, okay, what's your expenditure here? What percentage of your income are you spending on X, Y, and Z? And to get a handle on that first. All right. People talk about, I want to get more, I want to get a salary, I want to get a salary increase, I want to get a promotion to get more money, because they have this desire to progress, and I totally empathize with that. I 100% do. But it's quite often easier to reduce your outgoings than it is to increase your incomings, right? Mm-hmm. without it being painful, right? There are simple tweaks that having a basic awareness can help with in that space.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think I guess my background is project management, so there's probably an element of being focused in on things in a planful way. So I talk about the curse of knowledge a lot to people on the so once you know something, you assume other people might know it as well. So probably in your role, because you know stuff so intimately, it's always key to remind yourself this person may not have that clarity, or they have a lack of clarity on what they're spending. So that's certainly interesting.
Yeah.
This is probably more a selfish one as well. So from a savings perspective, I always hear, putting money on not deposit is bad, obviously, but looking at kind of packages or products that will give you compound interest or the potential for index linked funds are more beneficial over the long haul than maybe stocks or shares. What's your general word on that?
So and it's probably one that I get quite a lot of emails about. Is similarly, Rob, is people wondering, I'm trying to save the children's education, or I'm doing whatever, I'm saving X, Y, or Z every month. What's the best place? And look, there's limited options, right, in that space. There are lots of products, right, but generally speaking, there's two main ways in which to do that. One being deposit, and one being an equity-based regular savings plan, product, investment, call it whatever you will. And I guess I would go back to the start quite often. I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits and all of that sort of stuff. And one being begin with the end in mind. And I would always try and encourage people to be goal focused. So what is the goal? What's the purpose for wanting to get more return? Why take on risk or volatility if you actually don't need to in order to achieve your goals, right? So yes, deposit accounts get slated, but deposit accounts generally get slated by people that are trying to sell you the other option, right? So there might be a vested interest in saying that deposit accounts are rubbish. The rate on deposit account is not good, but again, if you call inflation at 0.4% at the moment, then a deposit account will thereabouts keep you in line with inflation, right? So you're not actually losing purchasing power of your money if you're staying in line with inflation. So if you need more than inflation, then that is merit for looking at the other option. And yes, compound interest, is a beauty, right? But only if it's done over the long term. And again, without going off into a tangent, I believe that an awful lot of people do not benefit from compound interest because they end up making changes to the plan or cashing in money or not sticking to a long-term strategy, so therefore don't benefit from compound interest. Compound interest really only, I won't say only has an impact, but you only see the significance of it over a 10, 20, 30-year period. If it's a 5-year plan, compound interest is really not going to make that much of a difference to you in the grand scheme of things, Rob. So again, I go back to that point. If you're going to look at an equity savings plan which carries levels of volatility, where there's a potential that you will get back less than what you put in, right? If you withdraw at poor timing, why would you do that if you're not clear on what you're trying to actually bloody achieve?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah,
but I guess
definitely.
That's my thoughts on it. Like, yeah.
Are they for that then? If you're putting money into a long-term investment, right, 10 plus 15, 20 years, where you will see that you stick with it, set it and forget it, maybe sort of terminology. Is it something you add to on a monthly basis, or is it something you would put in a lump sum at the start, or is there increments? Both. Yeah.
So I guess the most common long-term regular saving structure that people might see is the likes of a pension, right? A pension product, a retirement fund, call it whatever you will. And again, you will only benefit from compound interest if you stick to the plan, right? Mm-hmm. There's really no more sure a way to benefit from compound interest than if you're investing, saving regularly into an equity fund, right? And history has proven this, right? That if you consistently invest every month, irrespective of when the markets are up or down, you stick to the plan. That is what has rewarded investors. Don't change the fund when the fund is down 30-40%, which it does every 5-6 years on average. If you stick to the plan, that is what has delivered success for people. But that is when people want to get out. If they're invested in something, in a fund that's now down 40%, their initial and primal drive is, get me out of here, right? This is falling. I don't want to be in here. But again, it's only the people that can see the logic for staying in when that happens. If you think about it, it's the very same as buying a house. Would you ideally buy a house when the property prices are at a peak of 400,000, or would you much prefer to be buying when the property price is at a trough of 200,000? Where would you ideally be buying? And you want to be buying when the prices are low, and the very same can be said of equity investing. All right? It is exactly when prices are low that it is the best time to be investing and buying into those things, with a view that they will obviously increase in over time. And I think that's a piece that I'm really passionate about, is the long-term benefits and merits of investing. Long term, right? Talking 10 plus years. I know it's traditional, and again, when advisors might be trying to get you invested, to talk about 5 years. 5 years is a very narrow window, right? If you're going to be investing in the likes of equity funds, but over the long term. So let's take it from 1925, right? And we're talking about a global equity portfolio here, right? 1925 to 2018. An equity portfolio has delivered an average of just under 11% every year on average, right? On average. Now, have there been awful years in there? Yes, there have been years where the likes of that type of thing has fallen 43%, right? But on average, over the long term, that is what is delivered. And so, again, I'm talking about long term. That's obviously 100 years, right? We're not talking about investing 100 years, but it's just to paint that picture that despite the fact that there will be absolutely terrible and really scary periods, that it's the ones that hold their nerve have done well over the course of history.
What's interesting there is maybe some of your coaching skills might come into play when you're dealing with a client who's freaking the hell out when things have gone down 10%, and I want to jump and I want to go into something more stable. Do you find that helpful?
Yes, but I guess with the people that I work with, they're very well educated in terms of this is what to expect, right? If you're not expecting this and it happens, that's obviously pretty scary. But if you're expecting it, then that's par for the course, right? So if we look at December, on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the global markets were down about 15% over the course of the month. Again, if you weren't prepared for that, that's a bit scary, right?
Not a nice Christmas present, no.
If you understand that that's how it works, then it's not a thing. Like, again, in a recent blog and podcast I did was talking about the fact that equity markets, on average, will have temporary declines every year of around 14%. Every year. There will be temporary declines during the year of 14%. But that average annual return still stands over the long term at that 11% figure. So you go figure. That's the ups and downs that deliver the long-term returns.
When you're working with a client, and does it come into play to say, look, for example, you're 20 years into your investment, you've hit 50% over the course of the duration, as an example. Is there, like, do you work with them to set a kind of a get out clause to say, you're probably happy enough now, or do they want to, look, maybe I'll hang on for another bit longer?
Again, I think it comes back to what's the goal, right? What's the plan?
Okay.
I think everything has to be linked to some sort of a a life event or a desire or a goal or something that they want to do, right? Or gift, right? But I think when it comes to retirement planning, I think is the big area. So traditionally, what a lot of pensions, and again, I don't sell pensions, but what a lot of pensions will do is that they will, as you get close to retirement, Rob,
reduce the risk.
The traditional wisdom is to reduce the risk, right? So when you're 65, for instance, you might have 70% of your pension pot in a deposit account, right? The equivalent of a deposit account. And here is the challenge with that. If it's a couple, for instance, at 65 years of age, statistically, there's a very high probability that at least one of them is going to live another 20 years from that point, correct? All right. So this pot is the pot that they're going to be drawing income from for the next 20 years, right? And ideally, they'll want to be maybe drawing, depending on the size of the pot, let's say 5% a year. So they're going to be drawing 5% a year. But the money is sitting in a deposit account, which is ultimately just keeping in line with inflation. So what will happen is that pot will, generally speaking, get eroded far earlier than if it remained invested in something which is going to deliver it long-term returns. And a 25-year retirement is a long term. So why would you have it sitting in essentially cash or deposit account if you want to draw 5% every year and have that 5% increase? Why would you have it sitting in deposit? It just defies logic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes just the logical part isn't thought through, right? So that. Well,
again, I guess it's because it's an industry tradition that, look at, as you get to retirement, we'll do this, we'll move it into secure, and it probably sounds like it makes sense. But if you believe in the long-term returns of the equity markets, which it has proven, then ultimately, why would you not remain invested, and draw your income from something that is actually delivering you return? And therefore, you stand a reasonable chance of actually leaving some funds behind as a legacy, as well as having it sustained you right up until the day you die.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. You mentioned mortgages just very briefly earlier, and I suppose the current world of the mortgage market. What's the take on that? And again, the other one question I suppose you probably get asked a lot is, am I better to pay off lumps of my mortgage regularly, or invest it somewhere else? Again, does that come back to the goals?
Yeah. I guess it does, right? Because there's with those two aspects you've just touched on, Rob. I would argue there's no right or wrong, right? Because we do not know what the future holds. Nobody can predict what's going to happen. You can look at it and you can analyze it, and that's something that I do for clients. I analyze various options that they might have, right, and help them make an informed decision. Pardon the pun, right? So ultimately it's about analyzing the options as things stand today, and to make an educated guess, an educated decision based on things as they are right now. So the question of, should I clear my mortgage if I have a lump sum, or should I invest it, right? That's a really common one. And it's probably one of the most popular articles and podcasts that I've done, because it's a common challenge for people. And again, an advisor, again, depending on how they operate, may be encouraging you to invest it, because again, there might be a conflict of interest there as opposed to clearing the mortgage. But I would always ask, what would give you the greatest sense of satisfaction? Is it knowing that you don't have a mortgage to pay off and that you don't have a mortgage to pay every month? Or is it having a nest egg set aside for the long term that you can potentially access if you want to in the future? And then let's look at the numbers, right? And trying to figure out, some people are on tracker mortgages, right? Which they might be paying 1% a year. So ultimately, that's the rate that you are locking in for yourself if you clear that mortgage off, if that makes sense, if I've explained that. That's essentially the rate that you are accepting on that lump sum if you choose to clear the mortgage, is 1%. Some people will say, yeah, I don't care about the rate. I want to clear it. And other people would be like, okay, let's look at the numbers, let's look at the potential returns that I might get versus clearing it, and make a decision based on that.
Cool. So you have a podcast on that. People can get into more detail on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did a post, I think, recently around entrepreneurial relief. That's
something
what's that about?
So it's essentially a very generous tax relief that is available to both or sole traders, but also directors of limited companies where they own at least 5% of the company. And yeah, it's ultimately, I know it's a very sexy sort of title, but it's ultimately tax relief against capital gains tax on disposal of a business, right? So if let's say Robert the Green podcast was worth €1 million today, right? If entrepreneurial relief didn't exist and you sold that, right, on to, the guys that do serial podcasts, they decided they wanted to buy Robert the Green, right? Mm-hmm. So they paid €1 million for it. If entrepreneurial relief didn't exist, you would pay 33% tax on that gain.
Okay.
Right? So you would therefore have a tax bill of €330,000, mm-hmm. and you would pocket the rest, 670. Right? Whereas with entrepreneurial relief, if you qualify, and generally again, you can check out the blog for it, but if you have to have owned it for 3 of the last 5 years, right? And you have to have been involved in the day-to-day running of it. But ultimately, that will reduce your tax bill by 23%. Okay. So in essence, it's going to save you 230,000 of tax.
Okay.
So it's a really generous relief. Again, my thoughts on it is that it's to encourage people to create businesses, sell them on, move on, create more, get more involved in more projects, etc., just to try and motivate that activity.
Interesting. Definitely one that I wasn't aware of until I checked that out. So thanks for explaining that one. Is there any other kind of hot topics you kind of tend to find coming at you from your clients that are probably little known in the general scheme of things?
Yeah, I think probably, again, it's linking back to the transparency piece, but the hot topic is certainly around fees of that people are paying on investments. And again, it's one that's covered in the media quite a lot, in the papers, and I've contributed to articles on it in the papers. But there was legislation brought out January 18, EU legislation that basically enforced or forced any retail investment provider. So the insurance companies, if you buy a lump sum investment, for instance, it forced those providers to tell you what charges you're actually paying on that investment. All right. So traditionally, you might have seen, look at the annual charge is 1.2% or whatever the case may be, right, mm-hmm. per year on your investment. But when these documents came out, which showed the full scale of the fees, again, some providers, some insurance companies are better than others, but I've seen cases where people are paying up to 3.5% a year on their investments. So if just to put that in context, if you've 100,000 invested, you're paying €3,500 every year for holding that investment. If it's €1 million investment, you're paying 35,000 a year in fees. And that is really, really hard to swallow. But that's the reality of it. So again, that's a hot topic. It's one that the central bank are looking at. I know in the UK, it's a massive movement. And again, it's just about the transparency of what people are actually paying. If on the tin it says 1.5%, but behind the scenes there's all this other stuff that's driving it to 3%, how customer focused is that? And I guess that's an area that I guess a lot of customers and a lot of clients will be very inquisitive to know what's going on there. So again, it's just a transparency piece. I do think we need to be more transparent so that we're still around in 20 years to deliver the value that we can deliver to clients.
Question I had, I suppose, you obviously give this advice. Do you follow all your own advice as well? Are you very good with your own finances and management?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember hearing the expression, I can never really get it right, but it's something like the farrier's horses are the last to be shoed, or something like this, or the painter is his own house is the last house to paint. I guess I do, and it's interesting. I married a primary school teacher who's I don't know. Without generalizing, I think primary school teachers get accused of not being fantastic with their money, right? And if that's true, then my wife certainly lives up to that. So yeah, we're a good combo. We're a bit of yin and yang there, about managing the day to day, but also preparing for the future. But I guess for me, I guess where we're at as a family and the age of the kids, for me, a priority is to the experiences piece, and to be around and to do the fun stuff with them. But also having one eye on the future, and of course being prepared there. So yes, I do try to, as much as possible, follow what I do, and most of the topics that I come up with are probably from my own thinking and in how I look at my own situation and the various aspects to that. And I think I hope makes that very relevant then to people that might be listening as well.
So you do practice what you preach, which is certainly important.
For the most part, yes.
If you weren't in the world of finance, personal finance and advice, what do you think you'd like to do other than that?
That's a great question. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think I've sort of landed in a place where I'm really, really happy. I know it might sound a bit mad, but there's nothing else I'd rather be doing, I don't think.
A lot of people listening will be probably quite jealous to hear, that.
I suppose it took a long time to get here, right? It took a lot of work. It took a lot of thinking, and a lot of mistakes, and a lot of cul-de-sacs. But I think, I was like a lot of us. I was probably in a big organization where I was conditioned, and again, not to anybody else's fault, but only my own, but conditioned to pursue the next promotion, or earn another $5,000, or earn another 10 grand. And I sort of, it was through that coaching and through a lot of, as I said, soul searching, that I figured out, hold on there, this isn't actually what's important to me at all. So I now know what's important to me, and informed decisions and doing the work that I do is a big part of that.
It's interesting, the coaching, how massively impactful that can be, and it can relieve a lot of the tension in your own system once you figure that out, right? Huge. But I found it like that. Coaching is not an easy thing to go through, right? But I was watching a film the other night, or I can't remember where I heard it, but if you're going through hell, keep going. I think it was Winston Churchill that came up with it. I'm not sure, but it's that whole, and I certainly wasn't going through hell, but if you keep going through the rough stuff, if there's a goal at the end, then hopefully and usually it'll work out for us. Very true. Just on podcasting, as a fellow podcaster, does any of your interviews so far stand out, one over the other? Any really standout guests, and what you took away from any key one?
That's a great question. I guess I've taken nuggets from everybody that I've spoken to, and in fairness, you do lots of interviews. I probably do only maybe one in every 3 is an interview, so it's a lot of me rambling. I try to keep it to 20 minutes when it's just me. I've taken something from everybody. Probably the most impactful for me was podcast 100, which was Guy Spear, who's a US fund manager, actually, right? But he works in a very different way to the majority of people. He's followed Warren Buffett in terms of throughout his career. He's in contact with Warren Buffett. He runs this fund called the Aquamarine Fund in the US. Superb performance. It's an actively managed fund, which is not everybody's cup of tea, but this is really performed well. But it's his way of working and his way of thinking that really struck me. He's not about the money at all. He's about doing the right thing, developing, learning, progressing in all aspects of life, and was a really interesting guy to chat to. So that was probably one of the standouts for me, I guess, if I was to highlight just one. And he has a book out, which I'd read a couple of years before, The Education of a Value Investor, a superb book. And so from that point on, I was a big fan of Guy. And he was a standout.
Cool. That's a nice one, and it hits the book question as well.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
So we'll wrap it up, Paddy. Look, that was great. I as always, I've learned something from it. I thank you for taking the time. Tell me more about you, the work you're doing, how people can connect in, any upcoming events in your world.
Yeah, if I can just actually throw in one more just on the investments piece that struck me, if that's all right, Rob.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just when I was thinking about it this morning, if there was one thing, when it comes to investing, right? As I mentioned, if you're invested in equities, the potential for return is very strong and historically has been very strong on average. However, if people are investing in what they might call low risk funds, right? With an expectation of getting 5% a year, for instance, right? Which is better than deposit, yes. But I would always ask people to think about the end. Begin with the end in mind. If that's an investment in a retail product and you're hoping to get 5% a year, right? Fantastic. Sounds good. But not to rain on anybody's parade. If you think about this, if you're investing at 5% a year and you're going to be taxed, right? About 40% of the growth. So your 5% becomes 3%.
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying 1.5 or 2% in fees within that investment, your 3% now becomes 1.5 or 1%,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you've got that 5% return. So you have taken on a significant level of volatility with potential for obviously getting back less than what you put in for a net benefit of 1%,
mm-hmm.
right? And I see so many people doing that, and I'm wondering, what is the logic?
Mm-hmm.
And are they aware of the net benefit that they might achieve in doing something like that? It's not by any means to say that they shouldn't do it, but it is just to be aware that that's what they're aiming for.
Mm.
And if that's the level of volatility they're taking on in order to achieve that.
So if they were getting the 5%, it's down to 1 effectively. I know the title of this podcast is 1% better, so I'm not going to go too much against that. But maybe when it comes to finance, we want more than 1%. But earning, but then so the 10%. What would that come down to if you apply those deductions as well? Is it 4 or 5%?
So it's again, if you're starting at 10%, right? You're down to 6% after tax, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take your 1 or 2% off for fees, so you're down to 4.5-5%,
mm-hmm.
which
much more risk
is
obviously.
going to be a positive net difference, right? So it's just that thought I think is one to challenge people on, and I believe in challenging our thought, and I love when my thought is challenged, but it's to challenge the logic in what you're actually doing there.
Mm-hmm. But then I guess the diversification of the investment maybe gives you, if you have a little bit on deposit, you have a bit on your 5%, some on your 10.
Well, and again, it's or leave it all on deposit.
Yeah.
Right. If deposit is going to keep in line with inflation and therefore retain the purchasing power of your money over time, if it's going to do that, and that's all you need, why would you take on high volatility to get 1% net?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just to challenge that.
Sure. No, glad you put that one in there. Good.
So that was one that I had jotted down that I wanted to get across in terms of the logic for people investing, right? But yeah, I forget your initial question before I went off.
It was more just to wrap things up and tell us more about you and how people can get in touch and how they can follow you.
Yeah. So look, as I said, I suppose the starting point, if anybody wanted to hear more of my ramblings, would be to head over to informeddecisions.ie. That's the website. Drop me an email, training@informeddecisions.ie or help@informeddecisions.ie. I suppose, yeah, I'm on iTunes and Podcast Addict and Stitcher and all the usual podcast players if people are interested in hearing. I have 123 or 4 podcasts there, so hopefully there's something that will be of value to people. And I guess, yeah, my intent is always to help and to hopefully make some sort of a positive difference in terms of people's decision making out there. So that'd be cool if that was to help somebody. I guess the one other thing that I'd love to mention is I mentioned the book earlier on. Another favorite book of mine is a book written by an Irish guy who might be a great guy to interview, actually. Dr. David Keane is his name. He's living in New Zealand, but he wrote a book called The Art of Deliberate Success a number of years ago. And that book was recommended to me, and I absolutely loved it. And it's very practical. It's very much about what's important to you, and then basically learning the 10 behaviors of really successful people and how that can apply to you. And it's a life book as opposed to a finance book. And I love the book, so much so that I reached out to David one day, a couple of years ago, and we had a couple of Skype conversations. And he said, Paddy, you're a qualified COVID trainer, facilitator, coach. Yeah, absolutely. He said, we run programs here in New Zealand and Australia for thousands of people in the corporate world to help them with this stuff. We'd love if you were the Irish representative for this program. So 3 times a year, I run a 2-day workshop based on the book, and it's The Art of Deliberate Success. And we're holding it now. The end of March is the next one. And yeah, if people were interested, look up the website, artofdeliberatesuccess.com. And indeed, for information on that program in March, drop me an email, help@informeddecisions.ie. And I'd love to tell them a little bit more detail around how it can hopefully help them. So I'm really looking forward to that in March.
Brilliant. Two good book recommendations there, Paddy, and ways to get in touch. So I'm sure people might have a bunch of questions that I didn't ask, but that's how they can get those addressed, by giving you a shout out and taking it from there.
Check out the podcast. Yeah, it's probably the best place to start, Rob. Yeah, 100%.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Paddy, and I look forward to sharing this one with the world in the near term, and hopefully people got something from it to improve.
Hopefully.
Very good. Thanks a million, man.
An honour. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks a lot. Hey guys, just before you go, I'd love to hear from you if anything specific stood out from that episode, something you might take away and try and implement in your own personal or professional life to help make you that little bit better. On the other side, is there anything you think I could do better to make the show even more enjoyable, more impactful, and maybe meaningful? So drop me a note, rob@robofthegreen.ie, or connect in on any of the social platforms @robofthegreen. We also have a community on Facebook. Check that out. If you're really enjoying the show, maybe you could try and leave a rating or a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts app. Go in there, give us a rating, let us know how we're doing. That'll help with the ranking of the podcast up those charts. The more folks that potentially see it, because we're high up, the better. The more that might listen that never heard of it before. And the goal of the show is to try and reach more and more people and have that impact more and more. So that's down to you. Please do help me with that. I'm not going down the route of hiring podcast promoters, quote unquote, from other parts of the world, because they say they can help with the ranking, and I don't really believe them, or it's not very authentic. Help me do it in an authentic way. I'd really appreciate it. This year I'm going more all in on Patreon, so it's $3 a month. You can sign up, subscribe to Rob of the Green on patreon.com. That will give you access to Patreon only content. Nearly all the episodes of the 864 podcast are on there, and new ones will be added only there. The 1% Better show will have early releases there, but will still come out for free on robofthegreen.ie. There'll also be live shows this year, some phone-in shows, extra content. €3 a month will, hopefully, the more folks that subscribe, allow me to do more and more stuff on there, add more and more content. At the end of the day, that's the price of a pair of socks, maybe, that you might lose, or a coffee. One way or the other, it's up to you. If you want to join, you'll still get free stuff otherwise, but if you're enjoying what we're doing, help us grow, help us expand it. I'd really appreciate that. Adding new stuff onto the website all the time. There's an affiliates page under the Be Better drop down. Check in there. There's training courses that you can sign up to. More and more stuff will come in over time. Into season 3 now of this fun journey. Huge learning. Hopefully you're getting something from it too. Stick with it. Let's keep going. Enjoy the journey even more. Have a great day, week, weekend, and thanks for checking it out. Good luck.